You ever notice how you're always the one trying to keep things alive, always the one checking in, apologizing first, reaching out, showing up? Maybe you don't say it out loud, but deep down, you know it's not mutual. You feel it in the silence after you hit send, in the slow replies, in the way they smile when they need you, but disappear when you need them. Some people don't leave. They just stop showing up and let you do all the work. And the more you try to hold them, the faster they slip through your hands. Carl Jung once said, "What you resist persists." But here's the part no one talks about. What you chase runs. Not because you're unworthy, but because the act of chasing tells the world and yourself that you are incomplete without someone else's presence, that your worth is something to be proven, not embodied. So many of us were raised to believe love is something to earn, to fight for, to win over. But what if the people who drift away the moment you stop chasing were never really meant to stay? What if you're not being rejected? You're being redirected. There's a kind of quiet power in no longer begging to be seen. And the moment you stop chasing people, you begin to see who was really walking beside you and who was only ever leading you on. This isn't just about romance, it's about patterns, lifelong ones, the ones that tell you you're only lovable when you're useful, when you're available, when you're agreeable, when you're small enough to fit someone else's comfort zone. But here's the thing, the right ones never needed you to shrink. They just needed you to show up as yourself. Still, something inside you keeps reaching, calling, running, hoping. And that's something, that's what we need to talk about. And that's something, that voice inside you that keeps reaching, even when it's tired of being ignored. It didn't start with you. Carl Jung believed that most of our adult suffering is rooted in unresolved inner conflicts, not random pain, but reflections of the self that were never made conscious. He called it the shadow, the part of us we hide, reject, or forget. And often, the people we chase aren't just people, they're mirrors. You're not running after love, you're running after parts of yourself you were never taught to value. Ever noticed how you keep attracting the same type of person? Cold, distant, hard to read. You tell yourself, this one's different, but a few months later, you're back in the same emotional drought, wondering what you did wrong. It's not a coincidence. It's a pattern, and the most dangerous patterns are the ones we don't know we're repeating. Let me ask you, when was the first time you felt like you had to prove yourself just to be noticed? Maybe it was a parent who only gave affection when you succeeded, or friends who left you out unless you were useful. Maybe it was always subtle, never outright rejection, just a quiet absence that you tried to fill by being better, by being more. So you learned early on, if I try harder, maybe they'll stay. Now, fast forward, you're an adult, but that child is still running the show. And when you meet someone emotionally unavailable, something lights up inside you. Not because they're right for you, but because they feel familiar. And your nervous system mistakes familiarity for love. Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. That's what this is, chasing someone who doesn't see you, because deep down, you still think that if you're good enough, they will. But they won't, not because you aren't worthy, but because they aren't capable. The truth is, you're not chasing them. You're chasing an unhealed memory, a version of you that still believes love must be earned through effort. And until that belief is questioned, you will keep calling rejection romance and neglect chemistry. So let's pause right here and ask the question no one wants to. What part of yourself are you trying to heal by chasing someone else? Because once you answer that, everything begins to change. But to answer it honestly, you have to go deeper, not into your relationships, but into your childhood, into the earliest versions of you who learned that being loved wasn't a given, it was a task. Carl Jung emphasized the power of childhood experiences in shaping the adult psyche. He believed that unresolved pain from our early years doesn't disappear. It disguises itself in our behavior, in who we pick, in what we tolerate, in how we love. Think about it. If love in your home was conditional, based on performance, obedience, silence, perfection, then your definition of love is already distorted. It doesn't feel safe unless it feels uncertain. It doesn't feel real unless you're working for it. So when someone actually shows up and stays, it almost feels boring, unfamiliar, even suspicious. How can you trust something that asks nothing of you? This is where the inner child comes in, not as a metaphor, but as a very real psychological imprint that still drives your choices. The part of you that had to tiptoe around a parent's moods, that felt invisible in your own home, that equated being needed with being wanted. So, when you meet someone emotionally distant who gives just enough to keep you hopeful, but never enough to feel secure, your inner child sees a challenge, not a red flag. And that challenge becomes a mission. If I can get them to love me, maybe I'm finally enough. Now let's bring this into real life. Have you ever been in a situationship? Not a relationship, not a friendship, just a constant gray area where you're stuck guessing what you mean to someone. You don't leave because every once in a while they throw you a breadcrumb of attention, a compliment, a text, a night together. And in your mind, that one moment erases weeks of absence. Why? Because your inner child is still chasing the parent who never fully saw them. And here's the cruel part. Even when you know this, even when it hurts, you still stay. You stay because you're not just scared of losing them. You're scared of what losing them might confirm about you. That maybe you're hard to love. That maybe you're forgettable. That maybe, just maybe, it really is you. But it's not. It never was. You're just trying to finish a story that should have ended long ago. A story where you finally earn the love you never got. But healing starts when you stop repeating the script. So the question becomes, are you ready to write a new one? Because until you are, you'll stay trapped in a cycle that convinces you your value depends on how much you can offer, how much you can give, fix, tolerate, or endure. This is the trap of conditional worth. And it's one of the hardest illusions to break. Most people don't realize they're living inside this trap. It's hidden behind words like loyalty, commitment, or even selflessness. But here's the truth. If you have to abandon yourself to be accepted by someone else, it's not loyalty, it's self-erasure. You start to become the person who always says yes, even when you're tired. You make excuses for people who hurt you. You laugh at jokes that make you uncomfortable. You overextend, over-explain, overcompensate, all because some part of you still believes that if you stop performing, they'll stop caring. And sadly, sometimes that's exactly what happens. The moment you stop chasing, people disappear. But that's not a sign that you're unlovable. It's proof that their presence was always conditional, dependent on what you could offer, not who you were. Let's be honest. How many times have you been told you're too much when you finally spoke your truth, or too sensitive when you asked for respect? How often have you watered yourself down just to be digestible for someone who never intended to see your full depth? It's exhausting, but it's also familiar, and the familiar, even when painful, feels safer than the unknown. So instead of walking away, we double down, we give more, hoping this time it'll be enough. Carl Jung believed that true wholeness can't exist where we deny ourselves. That means love, real love, can't exist where one person is constantly shrinking. The world tells you that being chosen is the goal, but being respected, being seen without effort, that's the real goal. The right people won't need a performance, they'll want your presence. So ask yourself, are you loving from fear or from freedom? Because one will keep you chasing, and the other will teach you to stay still and let the truth reveal itself. And that's the moment everything changes, when you decide to stop, not as a tactic, not as a manipulation, but as a shift in identity, a choice to no longer tie your self-worth to someone else's acceptance. At first, it feels unnatural, like silence where there used to be noise. You resist it. You want to text them, to check their story, to remind them you still exist, but you don't. And in that space, something deeper rises. Grief, yes, but also clarity. You begin to realize chasing someone isn't just about them. It's about avoiding what you feel without them. Carl Jung taught that growth often feels like suffering at first because you're letting go of the false self, the mask you wore to be loved, and in that letting go, your real self begins to emerge slowly, quietly, authentically. Now, let's be real. Stopping doesn't mean the pain ends. You'll still miss them. You'll still wonder what could have been. But you'll also start noticing other things, like how calm your nervous system feels when you're not constantly analyzing someone else's behavior, like how much time you get back when you stop waiting by your phone, like how you finally start to hear your own voice again. Think about it. How many decisions have you made just to keep someone around? How many boundaries have you softened? How many truths have you swallowed? How many versions of yourself have you edited? All for someone who never truly asked who you were beneath the surface. When you stop chasing, you create room. Room for stillness, room for discomfort, yes, but also room for truth. And truth always shows you what's real. People will reveal themselves when you're no longer trying to control the narrative. The ones who stay when you stop performing, those are the ones worth building with. And the ones who leave, they were only ever drawn to the performance, not the person. So here's the real challenge. Can you sit in your own enough-ness, even when no one is clapping for it? Because if you can, you'll never chase again. Why? Because at that point, you've stepped into what Carl Jung called individuation, the process of becoming whole within yourself, not dependent, not desperate, just deeply rooted in who you are, with nothing to prove and no one to impress. Jung didn't believe that healing meant isolation. He believed it meant integration. That when you bring your unconscious patterns into the light, when you stop chasing the old stories, you start attracting people who match your wholeness, not your wounds. Let's talk about that. When you operate from a place of incompleteness, you naturally align with people who confirm that story. The unavailable, the inconsistent, the emotionally absent, because that's where your energy is vibrating. Not because you deserve it, but because you're still unconsciously drawn to what feels familiar. But the moment you begin to feel whole on your own, something shifts. You stop craving intensity and start craving peace. You stop chasing highs and start valuing consistency. You start noticing things you used to overlook, like kindness, honesty, patience. The kind of things you once labeled boring, only now you see them for what they truly are, safe. And here's the irony. The more whole you become, the fewer people you feel drawn to, not because your standards are too high, but because you're no longer willing to negotiate your peace for temporary companionship. You'd rather eat dinner alone than sit across from someone who makes you feel lonelier than silence ever could. And that's not bitterness, that's clarity. People often say, when you stop looking, love finds you. But it's not magic. It's psychology. When you stop chasing, you stop leaking energy into people who were never meant to hold it. You reclaim that energy and redirect it inward, into your growth, into your purpose, into becoming someone who doesn't just want connection, but can hold it. And those who are meant for you, they feel that. They recognize you not by your effort, but by your energy. So ask yourself, are your relationships aligned with your healing or your hurting? Because alignment is quiet. It doesn't demand, it doesn't confuse, it just fits like a puzzle piece that was never missing, just waiting. That's exactly what happens when you stop chasing. Space opens up, and in that space, the truth steps forward. Some people vanish, not suddenly, but gradually, like a song fading from a car radio as you drive out of range. They don't slam the door, they just stop knocking. At first, it feels like a loss, but over time, you start to realize you're not missing them. You're missing the version of you who needed them. That's when the healing begins. When you stop chasing, you begin to see clearly. You start to notice who checks in on you when you're quiet, who makes an effort without being asked, who values you not for what you do, but for who you are. And maybe it's fewer people than you expected. Maybe it's no one for a while, but the silence is honest. Think about this. Have you ever gone no contact with someone, a friend, a partner, maybe even a family member, and they never reached out again? At first, it stings. Then it stuns. Then it sinks in. They were only there as long as you were reaching for them. That's not connection, that's convenience. And here's what's even more revealing. The people who stay when you stop chasing don't just stay. They meet you, they reciprocate. They call, they show up, they ask how you're doing without needing something in return. There's no guessing, no decoding mixed signals, no one-word replies, just presence. You realize that love, in its real form, is not earned through exhaustion. It's revealed through alignment. Carl Jung said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." And part of that privilege is learning that you don't have to perform to be loved. You don't have to pursue in order to be seen. You simply have to be honest with yourself first. So when you stop chasing, yes, some people leave, but the ones who remain, they don't just stay, they stand beside you, not because they need you to need them, but because they genuinely want to walk with you. Now tell me, isn't that the kind of love you were always chasing in the first place? Not the kind that keeps you guessing, not the kind that disappears when you stop giving, but the kind that feels calm, clear, consistent, a love that doesn't demand you shrink, but allows you to expand. That kind of connection doesn't require pursuit, it requires presence. Carl Jung believed that the unconscious patterns we don't face will silently shape our reality. That means if we don't pause, if we don't reflect, we'll keep living the same story with different faces and wonder why nothing ever feels right. So maybe this is your pause. Maybe this video is your mirror. Maybe you've been running for so long, chasing love, approval, friendship, belonging, that you forgot what it feels like to simply be, to stand still, to let what's meant for you actually find you, instead of constantly proving yourself to people who were never ready to receive you. So here's the invitation. Stop. Stop chasing texts that never come. Stop holding on to conversations that drain you. Stop trying to explain your worth to people committed to misunderstanding it. Because the ones who are truly meant for you will never require you to abandon yourself to keep them. You'll know them by the peace they bring, not the chaos they stir. You'll feel safe, not anxious. You'll feel seen, not scanned. And when you stop chasing, when you finally sit in your own enoughness, those people, the right ones, they'll stay. Not because you reached for them, but because you finally stopped reaching and stood in who you truly are. And that maybe is where love actually begins. Now take a breath and ask yourself, who am I when I'm no longer trying to be chosen? Let that version of you lead from here. If this spoke to something deep in you, I want to hear from you. What was your moment? The one where you realized you were chasing someone who never intended to stay? Share it in the comments. And if you know someone who needs this reminder, send this to them. Because the moment we stop chasing, we start remembering who we are.